All right, now turning to our program, we are thrilled to welcome community volunteer and former Mayor of Wauwatosa, Kathy Eli, to introduce our speaker. Kathy.
Thank you, Past President Karen. Good afternoon, everybody. Our speaker today, Dale Kooyenga, has a new title on the way, but quite an extensive background. Prior to being elected to state offices, he was in the State Assembly from 2011 to 2018, and the State Senate from 2018 to 2022, and consulting early stage companies. Dale served as the senior manager at KPMG, providing services to Wisconsin's largest healthcare, manufacturing, government, and nonprofit entities. Dale enlisted in the Army in the early 2000s and is currently a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army Reserve. He has been trained as a military intelligence officer and was designated the officer in charge of economic development for the coalition forces in Baghdad during his tour in 2008. I had the honor of meeting and working with Dale when he was newly elected Assembly rep and I was elected the mayor of Wauwatosa. I invited all of Wauwatosa's elected state officials to meet with me and my department heads. Twice a year, I asked them for that commitment to get to know each other, listen, and learn from each other. My hope was that our elected officials would gain confidence in my staff and see them as a resource when municipal-related issues were being discussed at the state level. Dale was the only one of our representatives to take that opportunity seriously and continued through my 8 years in office. And I really thank you for that. In January, Dale joined the Metropolitan Milwaukee Area Chamber of Commerce, the newly created role of Senior Vice President as their board began planning for the retirement of his predecessor, Tim Sheehy, who was leaving MMAC, who had led MMAC since 1992. That's some big shoes to fill. On January 2nd, 2024, Dale will take over as president of the MMAC. During a Let's Catch Up coffee that we had almost a year ago, he shared about his interesting work that he was doing with the Army and for the Army that was cultural and arts related. And I hope he will come back another time to share that with all of you. But today, we will hear Dale's story and the results of his conversations with over 100 CEOs in the metropolitan area during this past year. Dale will share what he has heard from these conversations and share how his experiences in business, politics, and the military have shaped his perspective and his leadership style. So please give a warm Rotary welcome to Dale Kooyenga.
Well, thank you, Kathy, for the warm introduction. It was truly an honor to work with you for those many years. I think together we made some big impact for Wauwatosa and our community. And looking forward to working with you years ahead. It's great to see so many friends in the audience. Thank you for having me speak to you today. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell you who I am. We're going to be seeing a lot of each other over the next several years. And I want to tell you my background, where I came from, how it's shaped, how I see who I am, who our community is, and then talk about how that relates to MMAC, where we're at, and possibly where we're going. So I'm from South Side Chicago. I was the first man in my family to go to college. Nobody in my family ever went to college before us. And so when I was in high school, my dad, who was a garbage man, and my mom, who was a nurse, said, you're on your own for school, you need to figure it out. And so I looked at my grades, I looked at my checkbook, and both of them said I was a really good candidate for community college. And so I went to the community college on the southwest side of Chicago. And when I got there, I tried out for the basketball team. Actually, I was in a big construction accident the summer after my high school. I was in the trades. I was a framer, and I fell 2.5 stories. So I was in a wheelchair for some time and really thought about life and really thought about what I wanted to do. And so I couldn't try out for the basketball team because I was hurt. And so the basketball coach did find me at the school and said, hey, I would like you to try out for the basketball team. And I always had a dream of playing college basketball. And so he said, when can you start? I said, January 1st. So on January 1st, I was all ready to play basketball. And every other guy on that team was up all night on New Year's Eve. And a combination of them up all night, and if God ever cared about basketball, was the one day he gave me skills. I had a really good practice. I remember that day, the coach throwing me a jersey and saying, congratulations, you're on the team. After I dunked the ball in practice, which I have not done in a long time before that because of the accident. That experience of being on a community college basketball team, Southside Chicago, and the bond and the formations that built really had an impact on me for many different reasons I'll talk about. But after playing at Moraine Valley Community College for 2 years, I was recruited by Lakeland and moved to Sheboygan, Wisconsin. So culture shock moving from the south side of Chicago to Sheboygan, Wisconsin, it was. But it was a really good school for me. I really enjoyed my time there. And I graduated at a time where the CPA profession went from a 4-year program to a 5-year program. So no one was graduating in the interim. And so the larger accounting firms here in Milwaukee were looking for new places to secure talent. And so they came across me, and I interviewed at KPMG. And I got the job at KPMG and started there September 2001. And I just moved into my apartment on the east side, about Maryland and Locust, a block away from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And it was the morning of September 11th. I didn't start work yet at KPMG. I was starting work the following week. And turn on the TV and watch that day start to unravel, and watch that first plane that was announced hit the World Trade Center. And just watching, and then seeing the second plane hit. And that moment that we all realized that America was under attack. I remember my roommate woke up and I heard those surreal words out of my mouth that sounded like I was full of drama, that I was exaggerating. When he said, what's going on? I said, America's under attack. And subsequently seeing the Pentagon hit and that plane go down in Pennsylvania. So on the phone with my mom that day, my mom said, all 3 of my boys are going to go off to war. I explained to my mother that I shared a concern about where we're at and where our possible nation was going, but I reassured my mother that all 3 boys were not going off to war, because my youngest brother, Daniel, was in high school, and they don't send high schoolers off to wars. And my other brother, Russell, was in college, and even during the big wars, they don't send kids away from college. And I was an accountant, and for good reasons, they don't send a bunch of accountants to fight wars. But Mom's always right. Several years, right after that, my brother got the high school waiver and signed up, went to basic training between his junior year and senior year. I got a call a couple years after that from my brother, who was in college, and said, I'm graduating. When I graduate, I'm going to join the Army Special Forces program. And I started thinking about when we were little boys. I don't know if it was Saving Private Ryan or Legends of the Fall. I don't know what it was, but it was one of those movies. And we were little boys, and we said, if there's ever a war, we're in this together. I kept thinking about that, and thinking about that, and thinking about that. I couldn't get out of my head. So I was in a job in Chicago working with this girl. And she said, what are your career goals? Are you going to stay here as a partner? Do you want to be a CFO or controller? Like, what are you going to do with your career? And for some reason, I really opened up to this girl, and I said, I can't stop thinking about joining the U.S. Army. And she was from a small town in Southern Illinois, and she said, well, why don't you just do it? Why would you not just do what you want to do? I said, well, it slow down my career. It would be a big pay cut. My mom would be nervous with all 3 boys in the military. I gave her all the reasons it didn't make sense or why I couldn't do it. And that girl said to me, she's like, that's a great way to go through life, is really want to do something and never doing it. It struck me right here that I wasn't being genuine to myself and wasn't being genuine to what I believed. And I thought about my 2 brothers. And I also thought about the embarrassing fact of telling accounting stories at the Thanksgiving table while they were telling war stories, and drove directly to the recruiting station and signed up. That girl sent me an email a couple weeks later and said, hey, how's it going? Now, I'm a single guy, so when I get an email from an attractive woman, I think, hey, how's it going means, hey, how's it going? It was not that type of email, but I said, well, actually, I joined the Army. I'm leaving for the Army after busy season. I'll be going in April, and I'll be going to basic training and officer candidate school. And I said, hey, I'm passing by Chicago. Can we grab a drink? And she said, no. And I said, just to be clear, one of the big reasons I joined the Army was because you really inspired me. Like, you told me if I really had something that I really wanted to do, to just do that. And so I'm doing that. So can I at least get a drink? And her friend said, well, the guy did join the Army in time of war. The least you could do is go out with him just to meet with him. So today that's my wife, Jennifer. So it all worked out. If anybody did what I did, I would say, why don't you slow down? But the key to getting a very smart, good-looking woman when you are not very good-looking and not the smartest guy in the room is to get a date, go to basic training, get one more date, go to officer candidate school, propose, go to military intelligence school for 6 months, and then get married. So it worked out for me. We're doing very well. We have 4 kids in Brookfield. Shortly after getting done with military intelligence school and graduating, I was assigned to the Civil Affairs Battalion out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. This time frame coincided, if you recall, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were not going very well at all. And so at the time, there was a new strategy employed by General David Petraeus. And that strategy was that the process of going around and killing bad guys was just creating more bad guys. And so what we had to do is we had to brush off very old doctrine, very old ways of thinking, and we had to fight a different way. We had to, and this was called the surge. And so I was one of the soldiers that was activated for service in Iraq as part of the change of strategy of the surge. So I got to Baghdad. They looked at my resume and they said, we don't care about your military intelligence training. We don't care what the military taught you. What do you do in the civilian world? And I said I was a CPA and I had my MBA from Marquette. And they said, great, you're going to be the economic officer in charge of Baghdad. And I'll explain what that meant. But before that conversation another general said, you're in charge of sewer, water, electricity, and trash. And I was trying to explain to him that I'm kind of a business guy and I'm an engineer. And the general says, Lieutenant, do you go to the bathroom? Yes, sir. When you go in the bathroom, do you turn on the lights and flush the toilet and wash your hands, put your garbage in the garbage? Yes, sir. Lieutenant, you know everything you know about sewer, water, electricity, and trash. Go out there and get it done. So fortunately, they got my resume and saw that I was better fitted for the economic officer in charge. So whole other conversation. I did a lot of speaking about it, different experiences there. I'll just give you a couple of what we did. But we would do beauty salons. I mean, women would walk up in burqas and say, I want to do a beauty salon. And we would give them microgrants to start businesses. We had state-owned enterprises. Pretty much any company over 100 employees in Iraq would become part of the Ba'athist government and was owned by the state. So you can imagine there's a lot of room for improvement there. So one of those examples is there was this company that was making rugs. And we flew out an expert from Sotheby's and Christie's to advise us on, well, how can this rug company be profitable, how they do? And he said, well, they're making Elvis rugs. I was like, what are Elvis rugs? He's like, well, it's polyester, it's super bright, it's super corny, very low quality. So the oldest rugs in the world were found by the Russians in Afghanistan that they believe Alexander the Great had through Babylonia and brought with them in Afghanistan, were preserved in a Russian museum. So our concept was to teach the women that were doing that, were mostly widows from the Iran-Iraq war, and teach them proper looming, thread count, use natural dyes that came from vegetables and clays that were from the Kurdistan region, and teach these women to make rugs that sold on the international market for thousands and thousands of dollars. And they did that. It was very successful. We'd go back there several weeks later, and some of them would still be making the Elvis rugs. Like, what are you doing? Well, they really like making these Elvis rugs. So just teaching the very basics. You didn't need an MBA for all this work, just teaching the very basics of how markets work and engaging. But a lot of rewarding projects and a lot of impact made. But one of the impacts made on me on that deployment was in war you lose people, and you lose people that you love. And for me, one of those gentlemen was Major Dwayne Kelly. So Major Dwayne Kelly was my fellow college basketball player. He was a 6'5" black man from New York, and we'd always banter back and forth about basketball and talk about basketball. And Major Dwayne Kelly was on a mission in Solder City, and what was he doing there is he was doing what we were doing as part of that strategy, and he was having a conversation about what we could do to get more health care in that region to serve those families. And what happened was a young boy was given a backpack, and that backpack contained a bomb, and he walked into that room, and Major Dwayne Kelly and another soldier and 2 State Department folks were killed that day. And I'll never forget that day. I was the casualty assistance officer, which meant I had the responsibility of packing up Major Dwayne Kelly's things and getting everything out to Arlington to get to his family. And the reason I share that story in this context, and I share my vision with combat, is as I look at our community, I look at our nation, and I look at our political banter. One of the things, and we'll talk about this as far as conversation with CEOs, is the concept of where we are with race in this nation. And I just wish people could see, and it's so appropriate that we have this speech and we have it here at the War Memorial, Dan does such a great job with, is that when you see what right looks like, not perfection, but when you see what more right looks like, it is the American military. And it is guys like Major Dwayne Kelly who gave his life for the people of Iraq and for the mission and for the ideals that we believe in. And those experiences have a huge impact on me to this day when I still lead in the military. And it's also why it has such an impact on me when I see folks that can't see how much room we have for improvement in those areas. I came back from that deployment, did a lot of speaking about what we did there and why we did it. And, I felt like there was a need for folks in office that were more real, authentic, genuine, and had their fingers on the pulse as far as what their experiences meant and how it can make an impact. And so the seat for state assembly opened up, and I ran for that seat. It was really tough on my wife, as I said, hey, I got this great job in a big accounting firm, making good money. I'm going to run for state assembly. We're going to make $50,000 a year as we continue to grow our family. And we go back to that line she said, and that is, well, if you really want to do something, then let's go ahead and do it. And she was very supportive in that journey. So really enjoyed my time in politics. It was work at some times, and politics could be a really depraved part of our community, but it also be a part of our community that shows so much hope and promise and get a lot of things done. So it was an honor to serve for 12 years. I served 8 years in the state assembly, 4 years in the state senate. And then while I was doing that, I kind of juggled 3 different balls in the air. And that is a very robust military career. I've done a lot more than typical reservists, usually 120, 150 days a year, all sorts of different experiences in there. A lot of CFO consulting for early stage companies and startups. And then also a lot of, obviously, political work. So a third and a third and a third. And so what I really like about this opportunity that's this transition from that political world to where we are now is one of the folks that have had a deep impact on the way I see things, the way I operate. And he kind of identified what I knew before he articulated it, is a gentleman by the name of Arthur Brooks. Just by show of hands, who's heard of Arthur Brooks here? Okay, so not many, but I encourage you to check out his work because it's very consequential and it's a very Rotarian concept that he talks about. So Arthur Brooks was the president of the American Enterprise Institute. And as the president of the American Enterprise Institute, he was an academic, did a lot of research on happiness. And the question is what makes people happy? What makes people happy? And let me just tell you what does not make people happy. And this is especially when I talk to young people, they sometimes snicker and laugh. And I say, no, trust me, because you'll understand this someday. But what does not make you happy is having the nicest car in the parking lot. What does not make you happy is having the most beautiful spouse by Hollywood standards. But what does make you happy, according to government surveys since the 1960s, is meaningful work and meaningful relationships. Meaningful work and meaningful relationships. And when I look at my time in the military, and I look at my time in public service, and I look at my time in the business world, and I look at my most important job, which is the father to Grant, and Taylor, Quinn, and Ada, meaningful relationships and meaningful work is what drives me, is what just drives our community. And so when I look at MMAC and I look where God has placed me in the next chapter of my life, that is what I internalize. Is I internalize an organization that's been around for 162 years. And if you look at the vision of what MMAC is, it's a globally competitive region that fosters high-value employment to sustain a vibrant quality of life for all. And at the heart of that is exactly what makes people happy, is that meaningful work and meaningful relationship. So at MMAC, we are in the process right now of doing a strategic review. And so what I have done is I've had conversations with hundreds of CEOs in our region. And the question I've asked them is a very simple one, and that is, what does our regional assets look like? What do our regional liabilities look like? What are our assets? What are our liabilities? And then what's going to happen is that over the next 6 years is we'll take those answers to those questions that our team right now is looking at, our strategic review committee, and then we'll drive our operations to maximize how do we minimize our liabilities and how do we maximize our assets. And I'll run those off with you here in a minute. But that's how we plan on using our membership and our connections in order to impact the community. I don't suspect that our vision will change. I don't suspect that our 4 strategies will change. But I do want to share with you those 4 strategies that we have and a little bit what we do on those and why we do it. So our 4 strategies are talent, and that is how do we recruit talent to Milwaukee? How do we retain talent into our region? And that is everything from K through 12. How do we get more folks through K through 12, which is why we've been so involved in education reform issues. Everything from, I call it like Bob Bueller talent. How do I convince you gray hair folks here not to retire, to always stay engaged in one way or the other in our community? So that's talent. Growth. We have a 1% growth in our workforce between now and 2040. 1%. That is not sustainable. I think our mayor here deserves a big pat on the back because he's doing something here that elected officials typically don't do, and that is he put out there a big, hairy, audacious goal. What's his big, hairy, audacious goal? Is to grow the city of Milwaukee from 600,000 to 1 million. That's awesome, and we're 100% behind that goal. Livability, making this a great place to live. And when I run down the assets, I don't have to give you all the reasons that this is a great place to live, but it's a great place to live. And we want to continue to make this a great place to live, which is why the team, I can just announce it right now, the team, Tim and Andrew are not here because they were in Madison, and the Brewers package passed the Senate, and it will pass the Assembly this afternoon, so the Brewers will be in Milwaukee for 20 more years at least. And the last one I want to address is the word equity. Because in certain political spheres, when you say the word equity, people's heads explode. And I just came from a party where a portion of that party hears that word and heads explode. So I want to be very clear what equity is and why it's important to MMAC and why I suspect it will be one of the talent strategies or one of the strategic initiatives that we continue to fight for. I'm a CPA. We are a business chamber. For those of you in business, equity is a very simple concept. Assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity. Equity means ownership. Equity means ownership. And the fact is that everyone in this community is an owner of this community in one way or the other. The fact is that too many people, because of failing education systems, because of redlining, because of a whole list of reasons, is that ownership across our community does not reflect what our community looks like in many senses. And so that's why we're committed to program after program and relationship after relationship that creates a greater sense of ownership in this community for all members of our community. And we've done things like a region of choice to make sure that we provide more opportunities. And MMAC has blown the lid off the pledges on that, the goals. And so right now our very capable team is working with, led by Corey Joe Biddle, we'll be working with the community on what does region of choice 2.0 look like. So as time goes super fast always, I'm just going to list off what the interviews with the CEOs said as far as what our liabilities. And the top 3 liabilities that our CEOs have said so far And these kind of are all bunched together, and the conversations are still going on, so we'll see which one ends up being the top one. But crime, taxes, and our education system are the three liabilities. Just something to note that when Tim went through this exercise 6 years ago, racial issues and segregation was in the top two, which led to region of choice, and that has now fallen off to the fifth or sixth one, which I think reflects, one, the progress we're making, but also reflects that there's still significant work to do on that front. Also, liabilities are humility. We just don't talk about how great this city is. We have that Midwestern humility. So we got to address that humility by just doing more talk about how awesome our community is. On the asset side, it is such a long list of assets. I'm just going to rattle these off because I want to get to your questions. But the Midwest personality, it's what this Chicago kid fell in love with Milwaukee with, is everyone here will take a meeting. Guys like Rich Newson, who I don't care who you are, young whippersnapper, comment on in. I'd love to meet with you. Those type of people in our community. You're not going to believe this, maybe because most of my interviews were in the summertime, but 2 to 1, people think weather is an asset, not a liability. Our water, the affordability, the cluster of manufacturing, water, food and beverage, information technology, and financial hubs, the arts and the sports, the accessibility of getting around town, our universities, our proximity to Chicago and Madison. All big assets, and I had to cut it off there because there's a lot more I could say. Just really quickly, I want to go over the different parts of MMAC as you're probably not even aware of. We have our M7 team. Our M7 team is our economic development team, which is absolutely crushing it. The Microsoft deal that was announced is over $1 billion in additional investment from Microsoft. And the investment from Microsoft, I believe, is only crescendo in our area. And Microsoft doesn't make decisions lightly. They invest where they see the communities on the upswing, and Microsoft's going to continue to be a great partner of us going forward. Also, wins like we're going to have the largest candy factory in the Americas with Harborough down the border there too. So M7 continues to crush it, and working with many of you here to make sure we continue to bring corporate attraction here. Milwaukee Development Corp is a very little well-known part of our team here. Is we do very strategic real estate investing. So Library Hill is something that they did years ago. We own the Library Hill apartments. We will buy apartment buildings that have drug and prostitution issues and turn those over so that they have more responsible owners. We want to create more of a sense of ownership by moving renters into equity holders in those homes, and a bunch of other different projects they do. We run a health insurance plan with United Healthcare, so I encourage you to check that out. It's one of the most popular health insurance plans in the region. About our advocacy and our events, and also just sharing good things that are going on in Milwaukee, like Milwaukee Startup News. I will end it with just this fact, because I'm very proud of the momentum Milwaukee has. And I'm going to call out all you people on the camera. If you look at the 66 largest cities post-COVID, compared to pre-COVID, as far as the amount of economic activity downtown, the University of Toronto tracks cell phone data, and they publish the vibrancy of downtowns based on the flow of that traffic that is going in and out of those downtown. And of the 66 cities, Milwaukee is ranked number 15. We have tremendous momentum in our downtown. And if all you people that did not come today are watching on Zoom or downtown, we move into the top 10. So everyone get here next time in person. You cannot replicate physical presence. And we've seen that with education scores, with COVID. You see that in business. You cannot replicate physical presence. And so we continue to want to have a community that congregates and do things together. So really good news on that front, and really applaud what's going on. And also the last thing I'll say before we take questions is the role of MMAC. The fact is we have crazies in both parties, and we have adults in both parties. And so what we're going to do on behalf of the business community in Milwaukee is we're going to find the adults in both parties, and we're going to put them at the table, and we're going to solve significant issues like we did this past summer. That is going to sunset 2 infamous pension plans that added police and fire to our streets, that saved our parks, saved our libraries, because the Democratic county exec and Democratic mayor of Milwaukee worked hand in glove with the Republican legislative leadership. And they didn't go to Twitter when they had frustrations. They didn't go to press releases. They went back to our boardrooms, GMC's boardrooms. They went back there and they had conversations of how do we work this out and how do we fix this. And that's what we're going to continue to do. And there's a lot more problems we're going to solve, but that's the value organizations. Like it's great to see my friend Joel Brennan here. Looking forward to working with him on issues that we talked about here, with a lot of the challenges we still have in our community. But we got to stop being so humble and say how great it is because we have a lot of momentum going on. So with that being said, let's go to questions and hear what's important to you. Thanks for applauding, because he said if all goes well, they typically applaud. So I was a little nervous.
If you have a question for Dale, you can ask a question here with this microphone. And as a reminder, please keep your questions concise and topical.
You may not wish to comment on this until you become full president in January, but given your military experience, given what you said about adults in the room, one of the big issues that's going to confront the city and the state is school choice and the decision that the state Supreme Court is going to make on the lawsuit out of Minocqua. Your annual meeting spent a lot of time on choice, and do you have any thoughts on where you stand on this issue, given what's possible in Madison with the Supreme Court, and the impact on Milwaukee?
Well, I think one of Tim Sheehy's legacies will be that in 1991, the idea of school choice was a chapter in a Milton Friedman book. School choice was not a concept employed anywhere in the nation. And what happened was there was a very courageous Howard Fuller. There was probably a courageous and a little bit naive young president of MMAC. And then there was a bunch of courageous legislators who said, let's try something radically different. And that's where school choice came from in 1991. School choice has now expanded within Milwaukee. It's expanded throughout Wisconsin, but it's also been something that has now expanded nationwide because of what Tim Sheehy, Howard Fuller, courageous legislators, and the governor supported at that time. So where we're at right now is one of our big legislative achievements was there was a huge discrepancy in the amount of money that public school kids were getting, traditional public school students, and the amount of money that charter and choice students were getting. And I had to thank the legislature and Governor Evers, who stepped up in a big way and increased the amount of money to make it more equitable between the type of students and the type of schools they were going to. Now, as you point out, there's a lawsuit out there that was filed that's very difficult to take seriously. And it's very difficult to take seriously for many different ways, but just on the surface, one of the plaintiffs on there is Scott Walker. No, this is not the Scott Walker who was governor. They went out of their way to find someone with the name Scott Walker, and also went out of their way to find a Catholic priest with the title father, as if like the intuition is if the Catholic Church is against the school choice program, which could not be further from the truth. So we will be involved with, and although it's hard to take that lawsuit seriously with all the implications of that, you have to take it seriously, because in the very unlikely chance that that would succeed, you would have entire communities of yeshiva schools and Christian schools and charter schools, like whole communities would be broken apart if those programs were dismantled. And the fact is that our public schools aren't ready for that many kids to be absorbed into their system if that was dismantled. The other part of that lawsuit, which makes no sense, is the largest choice program in the state of Wisconsin is actually the open enrollment program. It is a public school to public school transfer of students. And the way that the lawsuit is worded and the way it attacks the school funding formula, it would also put the open enrollment program at big risk. And just look at Wauwatosa and how many open enrollment kids they have there. It would have huge disruptive factors across the whole state. So we don't know exactly what role will be involved, but we will be involved in defense of that one way or the other.
Hi. The arts economy is an increasing part of Milwaukee's draw to companies. How do you see MMAC and its component companies working with arts organizations to help support the arts economy in Milwaukee?
Yeah, it's a great question. The arts economy in Milwaukee is larger than the beer economy in Milwaukee. And the other thing about the arts economy in Milwaukee is the arts economy is intertwined in all of our economies. We're not going to be the manufacturing lead in the world if we also don't have arts intertwined with our manufacturing. So I got to speak to Imagine Milwaukee the other day, and I'll do the same thing with you. I'm going to give our four strategies, and then when I say the four strategies, you say yes or no if it has to do with the arts, okay? All right, talent. Yes. Equity. Yes. Okay, the arts community was a lot more loud and excited than you were on this. Growth and livability. All right, so the arts economy, we have a lot of members that are directly in the arts economy. We have all our members that are indirectly impacted by the arts economy, and we will definitely keep that community close and make sure that they're intertwined with the decisions we make. That's a whole nother talk that Kathy alluded to as far as what I've been doing with the U.S. Army. Who here has seen the movie Monuments Men? Okay, so if you've not seen the movie Monuments Men, I highly recommend it. It's very good. Very quick, what time do we go to with questions? 7 more minutes. Okay, so I'll go there. If you look at the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan is we were very, very efficient with combat arms. Like, we were very, very good. Historically, we lost less men in Iraq and Afghanistan over 20 plus years than we did in Normandy and Iwo Jima in a couple days. The problems we had in Iraq and Afghanistan was not the lack of efficiency or proficiency of soldiers and combat power. It was the ability to do transitional governance from the bang to the right of bang. Imagine Japan and Germany today if they were not our allies in Europe and not our allies in the Pacific. How different the world would look. World War II was not only won on the beaches of Iwo Jima and Normandy. World War II was also won in the boardrooms, in the judicial halls, and all the things to reestablish a civil society after 1945. And that did not happen in Iraq and Afghanistan. So my job the last 3 years in the military was to recruit the nation's top talent across 18 different areas. And one of those areas was arts and culture. So I would call PhDs from Ivy League schools and say, hey, would you like to join the U.S. Army? Like, dude, I'm a 48-year-old artist. And I would say, and we can make you a captain. Please join the team. Because the attack on arts and culture is what the enemy does. And China is doing it right now against the Uyghurs. The Taliban did it against destroying the Buddhas. ISIS did that in the Middle East. In Ukraine, as we speak, Russia every day destroys uniquely Ukrainian arts and culture. So bringing into the fight folks that bring these civilian expertise is what my focus has been in the military, and trying to break down those walls between those two worlds. And if you look at arts and culture and you look at the impact of that, it's also evident. And I never thought crazy places the world will take you. I never thought I would be in an Army uniform working with artists. I was on orders at the Smithsonian for several weeks, working with artists to incorporate them into our operations. So, yes, sir.
Well, thank you for addressing our club today. Thank you for your service to our country and to our state, and now in the future to the MMAC area. But that is my question. You mentioned Microsoft, you mentioned the city and the mayor's goals. Could you explain a little bit how MMAC works across the region as opposed to just the Milwaukee specific area?
Yeah, and that's why we are the Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce, not the Milwaukee Association of Commerce. We cover the 7 county regions because if you're going to have a regional economy, you can't just focus just on the city of Milwaukee or the county of Milwaukee. And quite frankly, I like the whole picture of who we are as a community. I love telling the story of how I could go to a Brewers game and then take my kids out to Pewaukee Lake, or come down here for a Bucks game and go up to Little Swiss, or just the entire region is how it comes together. And the fact is, if you look at our manufacturing base, if you look at our talent base, it's a regional economy, which makes us different than like a smaller chamber. And that's the economic development section that we have in there as well. So when we have very good relationships with the Racine Economic Development Corps, the Waukesha Business Alliance, the small regional chambers. And so I think everyone recognizes the importance of having a regional chamber versus just a city of Milwaukee chamber. And I asked those questions when I was in the interview process. I asked those questions. I said, how's it gonna, I live in Brookfield. How's that gonna be accepted by, and they without hesitation, the members of the board said, we're the Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce. And it's one community. And I hope in my position that we could reinforce that it's one community. And I think over the years that the tension between Waukesha County and other counties in Milwaukee, I think it's slowly been dissipating. There's still people that say things that are out of touch. When we talk about the crime issue here, I think there's a real crime issue that needs to be dealt with. I also think there's a crime perception that needs to be dealt with of folks in some of that regional issue. I would never go downtown, as if it's like, New York City, 1970s Gothic, like it's like something's bad for just having downtown. There's a perception problem there and a reality problem. So all those things together, it's a regional economy, and we take a regional approach.
Thank you very much for your talk. I know you're talking a lot about Milwaukee, but you spent a lot of time also talking about your military career, and thank you for your service. My father also was a veteran of the U.S. Army. You mentioned quite a bit about Iraq. Retrospectively, I'm just curious your thoughts now that you know that we basically were at war for so long in a country that never had weapons of mass destruction. So I'm interested in knowing that. And also you talked about the importance of art and culture in many of these countries. And Iraq in particular was very, very well known for their history of arts and culture. And so many of their arts and culture and museums, et cetera, were demolished in the war. So just retrospectively, I'm interested in your perspective.
Yeah, I'll say my retrospection on that. So I'm a retired man and going through there for many different reasons. I think history's complicated, war is complicated, and you never know what leads to what. And so I think it's a super complicated. I'm also biased. It's super personal for me. And I'm not ready to see that the whole thing was a waste with losing very good friends, not being there for the birth of my son. So war's complicated. The war's complicated. Also, farther down the list of reason I decided to leave politics was I take the profession of being a military officer very, very seriously. And as I got higher in the ranks and more press as an elected official, it's very difficult to be an elected official and an officer in the U.S. Army, because I feel the tradition of an officer in the military is to be divorced and apolitical and not be part of that political process, right? So I have mutual respect for the commander-in-chief, whether it be Biden, Obama, Bush, Trump, whoever that is. They're my commander-in-chief. And in the system, in this republic, that's who I serve, because that's who the people say I serve. And so I feel uncomfortable as a current military officer sitting here in a post-political sense, giving commentary on the right or wrong decisions in war. My job is to execute on behalf of all you and lead our men and women for what our country says has to be done. And someday when I'm retired and reflect on what went wrong, what went right, at that point in time, I'll share my opinions on it.
Respecting that you are still currently in the military, you did talk about that society could learn something from the military in the way that people equitably get along. And then you talked about adults in the room dealing with the state and Milwaukee. It seems like not only the military, but also everything is increasingly politicized. What are some steps that we can take in the private sector to work together, and what can you do to help affect that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things. I'll just give you, first and foremost is a lot of people make politics their religion. And I would just encourage you that if you find that politics is your religion, to re-examine your religion. Because politics is not a religion, and most people have made it that way. For me, my religion is Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, and I believe we live in a broken world. I believe that there's hope and light outside of that. That's my faith. I think the toxic political issues we have are in part because we don't have a lot of people that know people that were in combat, were served. And the percentage of our nation that has seen that part of America fighting together, different races, different political opinions, is at an all-time low. And I can't help but think that lack of perspective is not good for our country. And so I'd say number one is just don't make your politics your religion. Number two, be aware that this is not classified. There are brigades, there are divisions full of soldiers in Russia, in China, in other adversarial nations that are online as we speak on your social media in order to create more race-based, more political friction on those devices than actually exists in our community. They are stoking the fire to make each other hate each other, to create more animosity because that makes us weaker. That is asymmetrical warfare. That is happening as we are speaking, and they are disproportionately targeting our youth. So be aware, be informed. I recommend the book Like War. I recommend Like War. It talks about this. But that's the other thing is don't make what you see on social media the reality of what's going on in the world. Get out there, talk to people, and it's not as bad as you think it is. All right, thank you. Appreciate it.